In the heart of England's most elegant Georgian city, where honey-colored limestone buildings whisper secrets of centuries past, a queen was about to embark on a journey that would awaken a passion she never knew existed. Bath, with its Roman foundations and literary legends, held treasures that would captivate the royal heart in ways no crown jewel ever could. What began as a simple royal visit would transform into a profound connection with the artistic soul of a city that had inspired Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, and countless others. This is the story of how Queen Camilla discovered that sometimes the most beautiful revelations come not from palaces, but from the cobblestone streets where creativity flows like the ancient waters of the Roman baths themselves. The morning mist clung to the rolling hills surrounding Bath as Queen Camilla's convoy made its way through the winding Somerset countryside. It was early autumn 2023, and what had been planned as a routine royal engagement was about to become something far more meaningful. The Queen Consort gazed out of the car window, watching the landscape transform from rural farmland to the distinctive Georgian architecture that made Bath a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Her private secretary had briefed her on the day's schedule: a visit to the Jane Austen Centre, a walkthrough of the Roman baths, and a reception at the assembly rooms. Standard royal fare, she had thought, but as they approached the city centre, something stirred within her that she hadn't expected. The elegant crescents and terraces seemed to glow in the morning light, their uniform honey-coloured bathstone creating a harmony that spoke to her artistic sensibilities. Queen Camilla had always harboured a deep appreciation for literature and the arts, though her royal duties often left little time for personal pursuits. As a young woman, she had been an avid reader, devouring novels with the same enthusiasm others reserved for gossip magazines. Now, approaching this city that had been home to one of England's greatest novelists, she felt a familiar excitement building within her. The car pulled up outside the Jane Austen Centre on Gay Street, and immediately, Queen Camilla was struck by the intimate scale of the Georgian townhouse. Unlike the grand palaces she was accustomed to, this was where ordinary people had lived extraordinary lives. The director of the centre, Sarah, greeted her warmly, and as they stepped inside, the Queen Consort found herself transported back to the early 19th century. The narrow stairs creaked under their feet, as Sarah explained how Jane Austen had lived in Bath twice in her life, first as a young woman seeking marriage prospects, and later with her family. Queen Camilla paused at a display featuring Austen's letters, her eyes drawn to the elegant handwriting that had produced some of literature's most beloved characters. She read aloud a quote from one of Austen's letters about Bath. "I really believe I shall always be talking of Bath when I am at home again." Something about those words resonated deeply with her. Here was a woman who, like herself, had found something special in this city. As they moved through the exhibition, Queen Camilla asked detailed questions about Austen's daily life, her writing routine, and her observations of Bath society. She was particularly fascinated by how Austen had used the city's social dynamics as inspiration for her novels, weaving the fabric of everyday Georgian life into timeless stories. In the Regency tea room, Queen Camilla surprised her hosts by requesting to sit and simply absorb the atmosphere. As she sipped tea from delicate china, she imagined Jane Austen herself might have sat in similar surroundings, observing the social intricacies that would later appear in her novels. The Queen Consort found herself wondering what stories the walls of Bath could tell, what creative minds had walked these very streets. From the Jane Austen Centre, the royal party made their way to the Roman baths. Queen Camilla had visited Roman ruins before, but nothing had prepared her for the profound sense of continuity she felt standing beside the Great Bath. The guide explained how the Romans had built this complex nearly 2,000 years ago, and how people had been coming to these waters ever since, seeking healing, social connection, and inspiration. As steam rose from the green waters, Queen Camilla reflected on the layers of history beneath her feet. Romans, Saxons, Normans, Georgians, Victorians, and now herself, all drawn to this same spot by something ineffable. She dipped her fingers in the warm spring water, tasting the distinctive metallic flavor that had attracted visitors for millennia. The guide mentioned how many writers had found inspiration here, from Charles Dickens to more contemporary authors. Walking through the museum, Queen Camilla was captivated by the curse tablets, small pewter sheets where Romans had written requests for divine intervention. Reading the translations, she was struck by how universal human concerns were. People had been writing their hopes, fears, and desires for centuries, whether on Roman curse tablets or in Georgian novels. The afternoon brought a visit to Mr. B's Emporium of Reading Delights, Bath's famous independent bookshop. The Queen Consort had specifically requested this addition to her itinerary after learning about the shop's reputation for nurturing new writers and celebrating literary culture. Owner Nick Bottomley welcomed her into the cozy, book-lined space that felt more like a literary salon than a commercial establishment. Queen Camilla moved through the carefully curated sections with genuine enthusiasm, stopping frequently to examine displays and ask about local authors. She was delighted to discover that Bath had a thriving contemporary writing community, with authors choosing to make the city their home because of its literary heritage and supportive environment. Nick explained how the bookshop hosted reading groups, author events, and writing workshops, keeping the city's literary tradition alive for new generations. In the poetry section, Queen Camilla discovered a collection of works by contemporary Bath poets, inspired by the city's landscapes and history. She read several poems aloud, her voice carrying genuine appreciation for the craft and imagery. One poem, about walking through the Royal Crescent at different times of day, particularly moved her. The poet had captured something she was beginning to understand herself, how Bath revealed different aspects of itself, depending on when and how you looked. The bookshop visit extended well beyond its scheduled time as Queen Camilla engaged in animated discussions with local writers who had gathered to meet her. She listened intently as they shared their creative processes, their connections to the city, and how Bath's unique atmosphere influenced their work. One novelist explained how she found the Georgian architecture conducive to crafting period fiction, while a contemporary poet described finding inspiration in the contrast between ancient Roman stones and modern life. As the day progressed, Queen Camilla began to understand that Bath wasn't just a preserved historical site, but a living, breathing, creative community. The city's artistic legacy wasn't trapped in the past, but continued to flourish through new voices and fresh perspectives. She saw how the physical beauty of the place, its harmonious architecture, its riverside setting, its human scale, created an environment where creativity could flourish. The final stop of the day was the assembly rooms, where Georgian society had once gathered for balls, card games, and social discourse. Standing in the ballroom, Queen Camilla could almost hear the music and conversation that had once filled these elegant spaces. Her guide explained how Jane Austen had attended events here, observing the social rituals that would later appear in her novels with such wit and precision. In the octagon room, Queen Camilla paused before a portrait of Beau Nash, Bath's famous master of ceremonies in the 18th century. Nash had essentially created Bath's reputation as a fashionable resort, establishing the social rules and customs that attracted visitors from across Britain. She reflected on how one person's vision and energy could transform an entire city, creating something that would inspire people centuries later. As evening approached and her visit neared its end, Queen Camilla stood on the steps of the assembly rooms, looking out over the city she had begun to see with new eyes. The golden Bath stone glowed in the late afternoon light, and she understood why so many writers and artists had found themselves drawn to this place. There was something about Bath that encouraged reflection and creativity, a quality that transcended any single period or style. Walking back to her car, Queen Camilla made an impulsive decision. She asked her private secretary to arrange for her to return to Bath soon, not for an official engagement, but for a personal visit. She wanted time to explore the city's bookshops and galleries at her own pace, to attend a reading at Mr. B's, perhaps to walk the streets where Jane Austen had walked, and see what stories they might tell her. The drive back through the countryside was quiet, but Queen Camilla's mind was far from still. She found herself thinking about the writers and artists she had met, the stories embedded in Bath stones, and the creative community that continued to flourish there. Something had awakened in her that day, a recognition that her own creative interests and Bath's literary spirit were perfectly aligned. As her convoy disappeared into the gathering dusk, Bath settled into evening quietude, its streets and buildings holding the memory of another visitor who had been touched by the city's unique magic. Queen Camilla had arrived that morning for a routine royal visit, but she was leaving as someone who had discovered a new passion and a place that would call to her again and again. 3 weeks after her first visit, Queen Camilla returned to Bath on a crisp November morning, this time with a much smaller entourage and a personal agenda. She had thought about the city constantly since her previous visit, finding herself researching Bath authors, reading about its history, and even purchasing several books by contemporary Bath writers. The seed that had been planted during her official visit had begun to sprout into something more substantial. This time she started a day at the Victoria Art Gallery, a hidden gem she had learned about from one of the local writers she had met. The gallery housed an impressive collection of paintings depicting Bath throughout the centuries, and Queen Camilla found herself studying each canvas with the intensity of an art student. She was particularly drawn to paintings showing the city in different seasons and times of day, noting how each artist had captured a different mood and atmosphere. The gallery's curator, Dr. Elizabeth Hammond, had offered to give her a private tour, and Queen Camilla accepted eagerly. As they moved through the collection, Dr. Hammond explained how Bath had attracted artists as well as writers, drawn by the interplay of architecture and landscape, the quality of light reflected off the Bath stone, and the city's human scale that made it both grand and intimate. Standing before a watercolor painting of Pulteney Bridge reflected in the River Avon, Queen Camilla felt a profound connection to the artist's vision. The painting captured not just the physical beauty of the bridge but something more elusive, the sense of timelessness that pervaded Bath. She asked Dr. Barjahani Hammond about the artist's techniques, genuinely curious about how such effects were achieved. "Your Majesty, would you be interested in trying some watercolor painting yourself?" "Doctor," Hammond asked, noting the Queen Consort's genuine interest. "We have a small studio space and I could arrange for some basic supplies." The suggestion caught Queen Camilla by surprise, but she found herself nodding enthusiastically. Within an hour, she was seated at an easel with a view of the Abbey, a palette of watercolors before her, and Dr. Hammond providing gentle guidance. As she made her first tentative brushstrokes, Queen Camilla felt a sense of liberation she hadn't experienced in years. The painting that emerged was far from accomplished, but it captured something essential about her relationship with Bath, the sense of discovery, the pleasure of seeing familiar forms in new ways, the satisfaction of creating something with her own hands. Dr. Hammond praised her use of color and encouraged her to continue exploring watercolor painting as a hobby. From the gallery, Queen Camilla walked through the city center, this time noticing details that had escaped her attention during her official visit. She observed how the morning light played across the Georgian facades, how the narrow medieval streets contrasted with the grand 18th-century crescents, how the modern city had grown around and incorporated its historical layers. At the Bath Abbey, she spent time in quiet reflection, reading the memorial plaques that told stories of Bath residents throughout the centuries. Many were writers, artists, musicians, and thinkers who had chosen to make Bath their home. She began to understand that the city's creative reputation wasn't accidental, but the result of generations of artistic people finding something here that nourished their creativity. Her next destination was the Fashion Museum, where she had arranged to meet with curator Rosemary Harden. While fashion might seem tangential to literature and art, Queen Camilla had learned that clothing and social customs were integral to understanding the world of Jane Austen and other Bath writers. The museum's collection of historical garments helped bring their fictional worlds to life. Walking through the displays of Georgian, Regency, and Victorian clothing, Queen Camilla gained new appreciation for how writers like Austen had used descriptions of dress and fashion to convey character and social status. The curator showed her examples of the morning dress, walking dress, and ball gowns that would have been familiar to Austen's heroines, explaining how restrictive clothing influenced women's daily activities and social interactions. Queen Camilla was fascinated by a display about the social rituals of Georgian Bath, from morning visits to assembly balls. She began to understand how writers had mined these social conventions for both comedy and social commentary. The rigid rules of Georgian society provided the framework within which characters could reveal their true natures through small transgressions or conformities. Lunch was at Sally Lunn's historic eating house, where Queen Camilla had requested to dine alone with just one aide, wanting to experience Bath as an ordinary visitor rather than a royal guest. Sitting in the ancient building, eating the famous Sally Lunn bun while reading one of Jane Austen's letters about Bath, she felt a profound connection to the continuity of human experience across centuries. The afternoon brought a visit to Waterstones, where she met with the events coordinator to discuss the store's literary programming. Queen Camilla was impressed by the range of author events, book clubs, and writing workshops that kept Bath's literary culture vibrant and accessible to everyone. She learned about efforts to support local writers and introduce young people to literature through school programs and family events. During her conversation with local authors and booksellers, Queen Camilla revealed that her experiences in Bath had inspired her to begin writing herself. She had started keeping a journal about her visits to the city, recording not just events but her emotional responses to different places and experiences. Writing, she discovered, helped her process and understand her own reactions to Bath's unique atmosphere. One of the authors, Margaret Thompson, who had recently published a novel set in contemporary Bath, offered to introduce Queen Camilla to other members of the city's writing community. This led to an impromptu gathering at a nearby cafe, where Queen Camilla found herself in animated discussion with poets, novelists, and screenwriters who had chosen Bath as their creative home. The conversation ranged from practical matters like finding quiet spaces to write, to more philosophical questions about how place influences creativity. Several writers mentioned that Bath's combination of historical weight and contemporary vitality provided perfect conditions for exploring themes of continuity and change in their work. Others spoke about how the city's beauty inspired them to pay closer attention to language and description. Queen Camilla shared her own nascent interest in writing and painting, admitting that Bath had awakened creative impulses she had suppressed for years. The writers were encouraging and supportive, offering practical advice about developing a creative practice while managing other responsibilities. They suggested local writing groups she might join and recommended books about the craft of writing. As the afternoon progressed, Queen Camilla realized that she was experiencing Bath in an entirely different way than during her official visit. Without the constraints of a rigid schedule and formal protocols, she was able to follow her curiosity and engage with people as fellow enthusiasts rather than as subjects greeting their sovereign. This more personal approach revealed layers of the city's character that weren't visible during official engagements. Her final stop was Prior Park Landscape Garden, where she had arranged to meet with the head gardener to learn about the garden's design and history. Created in the 18th century by entrepreneur Ralph Allen, the garden represented the same Georgian aesthetic principles that had shaped Bath's architecture. Walking the serpentine paths and admiring the carefully composed views, Queen Camilla began to understand how landscape design and architecture worked together to create Bath's distinctive character. Standing on the hillside overlooking the city, with the golden Bathstone buildings spread below her and the Mendip Hills rising in the distance, Queen Camilla felt a profound sense of connection to the place and its creative traditions. She'd begun her day as an interested visitor but was ending it as someone who felt a genuine claim to Bath's artistic community. The drive back to London was filled with plans and possibilities. Queen Camilla had arranged to return the following month, this time to attend a literary festival as an ordinary participant rather than a royal patron. She had also committed to joining a watercolor painting class and had exchanged contact information with several local writers who had offered to help her develop her own writing practice. More significantly, she had begun to envision ways that her royal platform could support Bath's creative community and similar artistic environments throughout Britain. She saw possibilities for highlighting the importance of local literary cultures, supporting independent bookshops and arts venues, and encouraging young people to engage with creative writing and visual arts. As her car crossed the county boundary leaving Somerset, Queen Camilla was already planning her next visit to Bath. But more than that, she was planning how to integrate the creative practices she had discovered there into her daily life. Bath had not just shown her beautiful buildings and interest in history, it had shown her a way of living that valued creativity, reflection, and the kind of deep engagement with place and community that nourishes the human spirit. The Queen Consort, who had first visited Bath as part of her royal duties, was returning to London as someone who had discovered new aspects of herself and new ways of understanding the world. Bath had worked its subtle magic, transforming a routine engagement into a personal renaissance that would influence the rest of her life. 6 months after her first encounter with Bath's literary spirit, Queen Camilla had become a regular and beloved presence in the city's cultural life. Her third visit marked a significant milestone. She was returning not just as an enthusiastic newcomer to the creative community, but as someone who had begun to contribute to it herself. In her hands was a leather-bound journal filled with observations, sketches, and the beginnings of what would become her first published essay about the transformative power of place. The early morning found her in a small workshop above Mr. B's Emporium of Reading Delights, where she had joined a writers' circle that met monthly to share works in progress and offer mutual support and critique. The group, which included both published authors and enthusiastic amateurs, had initially been nervous about the prospect of a royal member, but Queen Camilla's genuine humility and eagerness to learn had quickly put everyone at ease. Today, she was scheduled to read from her Bath journal for the first time. The piece she had chosen dealt with her experience of discovering watercolor painting at the Victoria Art Gallery and how the process of trying to capture Bath's light and color on paper had taught her to see the city with new eyes. As she read aloud her description of mixing colors to match the honey-colored Bathstone, her voice carried the enthusiasm of someone who had found a new language for expressing long-held feelings. The other writers offered thoughtful feedback, praising her attention to sensory detail and her ability to convey the emotional impact of creative discovery. Margaret Thompson, the novelist who had become one of Queen Camilla's closest friends in the Bath writing community, suggested that the piece would make an excellent contribution to a collection of essays about Bath that the local writers were planning to publish. From the writing workshop, Queen Camilla walked to the assembly rooms where she was scheduled to meet with the director of the Bath Festival to discuss a new initiative she was proposing. Over the months, her experiences in Bath had convinced her that the city's creative community deserved greater recognition and support. She had been working with her private office to develop a program that would celebrate and support similar artistic communities throughout Britain. The Bath Creative Heritage Project, as it had come to be called, would establish partnerships between royal patronage and local creative communities, providing funding for literary festivals, arts education programs, and initiatives to preserve and celebrate local cultural traditions. Bath would serve as the pilot program, with successful elements later being adapted for other historic towns and cities with significant creative legacies. During her meeting with festival director Sarah McIntyre, Queen Camilla outlined her vision for expanding the festival's reach while maintaining its intimate, community-focused character. She had learned through her own experience that Bath's appeal lay not in grand spectacle but in the opportunity for genuine connection between artists, writers, and audiences. The royal support would enhance this quality rather than overwhelming it. The afternoon brought one of Queen Camilla's favourite Bath activities, a watercolour painting session in the courtyard of the Roman Baths. Under the guidance of local artist David Chen, she had been developing her skills over the months, progressing from tentative first attempts to more confident explorations of colour and composition. Today's subject was the Great Bath itself, with its steam and reflections providing a challenging but inspiring subject. As she worked, Queen Camilla reflected on how much her understanding of both Bath and herself had evolved. The initial attraction had been largely intellectual, an appreciation for the city's literary connections and historical significance, but through the practice of painting and writing, she had developed a more intimate and embodied relationship with the place. She knew the way light moved across different buildings at various times of day, had learned to recognize the subtle color variations in different types of Bath stone, and had come to understand how the city's topography influenced both its weather and its social geography. Her painting session was interrupted by the arrival of a group of school children from a local primary school who were visiting the Roman Baths as part of their history curriculum. Their teacher, recognizing Queen Camilla, asked if she would mind speaking briefly to the children about her painting. What followed was an impromptu and delightful conversation about art, history, and the pleasure of creative expression. The children were fascinated by the idea that even adults needed to practice and learn new skills, and Queen Camilla found herself explaining how she had been nervous about her first attempts at painting and writing, just as they might be nervous about new subjects at school. She showed them her painting in progress, pointing out mistakes and explaining how she was learning to see them as opportunities rather than failures. One 8-year-old girl asked if Queen Camilla had written any books, and she explained that she was just beginning to write short pieces about Bath and her experiences there. The girl's teacher mentioned that their class was working on creative writing projects about their local area, and Queen Camilla spontaneously offered to read some of their work if they would like to share it with her. This interaction led to what would become one of the most meaningful aspects of the Bath Creative Heritage Project, a program connecting young writers with established authors and providing opportunities for children to develop creative skills while learning about their local history and culture. Queen Camilla saw in these children the next generation of Bath's creative community and was determined to help nurture their talents. The evening brought the culmination of Queen Camilla's evolving relationship with Bath, the launch of Reflections on Bath, a slim volume of essays, poems, and artwork created by members of the city's creative community, including her own contribution about discovering watercolor painting. The launch was held at the Jane Austen Centre, bringing her journey full circle to where it had begun. Standing in the same rooms where she had first begun to understand Jane Austen's connection to Bath, Queen Camilla addressed a gathering that included many of the writers, artists, and cultural figures who had welcomed her into their community. She spoke about how Bath had taught her that creativity was not a luxury or an indulgence, but an essential way of engaging deeply with the world around us. Her contribution to the collection, now titled Learning to See, had evolved from her original journal entry into a more polished essay that traced her journey from curious visitor to committed participant in Bath's creative life. The piece explored themes that would become central to her later advocacy for arts education: the importance of making space for creativity in busy lives, the way artistic practice enhances our ability to observe and appreciate our surroundings, and the role of supportive communities in nurturing creative confidence. As copies of the book were signed and conversations flowed around the Regency tea room, Queen Camilla found herself thinking about how profoundly her life had been enriched by her Bath experiences. She had gained not just new hobbies but new ways of understanding herself and her role as a public figure. The creative practices she had learned in Bath had given her tools for reflection and expression that enhanced every other aspect of her life. The success of the evening was measured not just in books sold or positive reviews, though both were gratifying, but in the conversations it sparked. Young people spoke with established artists about technique and inspiration. Local residents discovered authors and painters they hadn't known were working in their midst. Visitors from other parts of Britain learned about Bath's contemporary creative scene as well as its historical significance. Several months later, Queen Camilla returned to Bath for what had become a regular quarterly visit, this time to participate in the first Bath Young Writers' Workshop, a program that had grown out of her encounter with the school children at the Roman Baths. 20 young people between the ages of 8 and 18 had been selected to participate in a weekend intensive that combined creative writing exercises with explorations of Bath's literary heritage. Working alongside professional authors and educators, Queen Camilla helped guide the young writers through exercises designed to help them find their own voices while learning from the literary tradition that surrounded them. She was struck by their fresh perspectives on familiar Bath landmarks and their ability to see possibilities that more experienced eyes might miss. One teenager wrote a compelling short story imagining Jane Austen using social media to navigate Bath society. A 10-year-old created a poem about the Roman baths that combined historical facts with fantastical elements. Several participants collaborated on a piece about environmental changes in Bath over the centuries, using creative writing to explore serious contemporary issues. Queen Camilla's role in these workshops had evolved naturally from participant to mentor. Her own journey as a beginning writer gave her credibility with young people who were also finding their creative voices. She could speak authentically about the challenges of starting to write later in life, the importance of persistence in developing creative skills, and the joy of discovering new ways of seeing and expressing the world. The workshops also provided opportunities for intergenerational exchange that enriched everyone involved. Older writers were energized by the fresh perspectives and fearless creativity of the young participants, while the young people benefited from the experience and wisdom of their mentors. Queen Camilla often remarked that these sessions taught her as much as she taught others. As her fourth year of regular Bath visits began, Queen Camilla had become something she had never expected, a genuine member of a creative community, valued not for her title, but for her contributions and commitment. Her second published piece, a reflection on the relationship between place and creativity, had been featured in a national literary magazine, and she had been invited to speak at conferences about arts education and community cultural development. More importantly for her personally, the creative practices she had discovered in Bath had become integral to her daily life. She maintained a regular writing practice, kept watercolor supplies in her private apartments, and had incorporated time for creative reflection into even her busiest schedules. The skills she had learned in Bath had enhanced her ability to connect with people during royal engagements, giving her new ways to understand and appreciate the communities she visited. The Bath Creative Heritage Project had expanded beyond its initial scope, supporting creative communities in 12 other historic British towns and cities. Each location brought its own character and traditions, but all shared Bath's combination of historical significance and contemporary vitality that made them fertile ground for artistic expression. Standing once again on the steps of the assembly rooms, looking out over the city that had transformed her understanding of creativity and community, Queen Camilla reflected on the unexpected journey that had begun with a routine royal engagement. Bath had taught her that it was never too late to discover new aspects of oneself, that creativity was not a talent reserved for the specially gifted, but a capacity that could be developed by anyone willing to observe closely and express honestly. The golden Bath stone glowed in the late afternoon light, as it had on her first visit years earlier. But now she saw it with the eyes of someone who had tried to capture that glow in watercolor, who had struggled to find words adequate to its beauty, who had learned that the city's real treasures lay not just in its architecture, but in its capacity to inspire human creativity across centuries and generations. Queen Camilla had come to Bath seeking to understand Jane Austen's connection to the city. She was leaving with her own profound connection, one that would continue to inspire and guide her for years to come. In discovering Bath's artistic and literary spirit, she had discovered new dimensions of her own spirit as well.